understanding. Now what I want to do is to give you this tapestry of a number of different threads and themes that have contributed to what we're now calling new or secular monasticism. I want to mention two communities, and Larry's going to talk about these later, so I'm just going to mention them and say this is what these were important communities. The first was the Iona community that was begun in 1938, and the second is the Taizé community that was begun in 1940. Both vibrant attempts at looking at monastic tradition and saying what does monastic tradition look like in then the mid-20th century. I'm not going to say any more, I'll let Larry talk about those later. The second thread in this tapestry are the intentional communities that began in the 1970s. Now, some of these intentional communities were very short-lived. Some of them still exist today, but have morphed into different forms. I want to mention just one of them, which I think is really interesting. A few years ago, our good friend Willard Deitch, who sadly died just this week, and so those of you that know, I would ask you to pray for Dorothy and their family. But Willard came to our retreat and several times, and after one of them he said, did you know about the Lindisfarne Association? And I said, nope, what's the Lindisfarne Association? He says, well, back in the 70s there was this community called Lindisfarne in New York that I was loosely connected to. So he said, I'm sure I've got some papers somewhere. So about 6 months later I get this knock on the door, and there's Willard, and he's got this envelope here. And take out the mystery from the envelope, and it's a document dated August the 27th, 1974, and it's a copy of the Lindisfarne Association document that was dated 1973. I can't see the exact date. So this was in 2005 when Willard gave us this. I'll just read you this because it just was interesting. It says, the Lindisfarne Association in Southampton, Long Island became a physical reality in 1973. At Lindisfarne, in an educational spiritual community in which people of all ages can work and study together new forms of growth and transformation. At Lindisfarne, the program of residence is instructional in the transformational disciplines of yoga, Buddhism, Sufism, as well as in the esoteric schools of our Judaic and Christian traditions. And it goes on and on and on about this. And I was just amazed, and it was really quite bizarre to be reading about people talking about Lindisfarne, but talking about Lindisfarne in much the ways that we do. Since then I have discovered that the Lindisfarne Association again morphed from a community living these transformational ideas to a group of academics, and was only formally disbanded in 2009, though the academics still get together, and they're academics from lots of different disciplines. It eventually moved out to California, as everything does, right? We're going there soon. And they took this old monastery over, and it became linked with a Buddhist community out there. And anyway, if anybody's interested to look at a little bit of, I suppose we could call it history now, back from the early 70s. But the Lindisfarne Association was one of those communities that started in the 70s that were, in some respects, I suppose, a response to the changes in the 1960s and new sense of spirituality. I think the Lovin was part of that moment. Susanna Wright was that whole changes that began to happen in those days. Now I think that the best of the intentional communities has found its way into what we're now calling the new monasticism. A third thread in this tapestry is Celtic spirituality and monasticism. And this is one of the roots that, that's R-O-U-T-H, you say routes? Not roots. Anyway, one of the routes or routes that that Jane and I took to come into new monasticism. In the 80s, we lived in Northumberland, and we would go to the holy island of Lindisfarne several times a year. It became a favourite place for us to be. It's an island just off the coast of England, at the border of Scotland, the Berwick and Tweed, which is cut off by the tide twice a day, so it becomes an island twice a day, and the rest of the time you can actually drive over there, and every year some foolish motorist thinks, ha, I can beat the North Sea, and off they go, and get swept off. But it's quite a fun place to be. And then we began exploring Celtic spirituality, led by our friend John Skinner and another Baptist minister at the time, Roy Searle, who is still one of the leaders of Northumbria community. We began to have retreats on Holy Island and to explore things. The Northumbria community, which was John, Roy and Andy, began formally in 1991. The Lindisfarne community, though we were not called that, we began in 1994. The next significant date for us was our formal chartering in 2001, when Archbishop Wayne Husada, the then Communion of Evangelical Episcopal Churches, formally chartered our community as a jurisdiction and appointed Jane and I as the abbot and abbess. And then we received the apostolic succession in 2003. Other communities, Ray Simpson, that some of you will know from his writings on Celtic spirituality, began the community of Aidan and Hilda in 1994. They now have a presence on Holy Island, which is Lindisfarne. John and Linda Skinner left the Northumbria community in, I think, 1997, and moved for a while to the Caribbean, and then followed their vision and their heart to Selçuk in Turkey, where they now have a house of prayer called Emigre, internal emigre of wandering monastics. So that's the third thread, was Celtic spirituality.